All right, let's talk watches. But we're not just going to be talking about telling time. Today, we are diving deep into the world of high-end timepieces to figure out how that thing on your wrist can sometimes be worth way, way more than the car in your garage.
Let's just start with a number, shall we? $550,000. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. What on earth could cost that much?
If you guessed a watch, you are spot on. That is the actual market value of a single Patek Philippe. And this is where things get really interesting, because we're not just talking about a luxury item anymore. We're talking about a serious financial instrument. And that right there is the core idea we're unpacking today. As one expert put it, for the people who really get this market, a watch isn't just a watch. It's a tangible, wearable piece of equity. So what is this mythical $500,000 watch? It is the Patek Philippe 5711. Specifically, the 40th anniversary edition of the Nautilus, a truly legendary design that has had collectors obsessed since it first came out back in '76. So how in the world does a watch get to that value? Well, let's break it down. First, it was an incredibly limited run. Only 700 were ever made. It's crafted from pure platinum. And get this, you couldn't just walk in and buy one. Patek had to literally invite you. Its original price tag back in 2016 was about 120 grand. Today, it's worth over 4.5 times that. It is the perfect storm of true rarity and brand prestige, creating unbelievable value.
Okay, so the Patek is, it's a unicorn, an extreme example, but the basic principles of value, they apply right across the board. So let's bring it back to earth a little and talk about a brand we all know, but one that's still incredibly complex: Rolex. We're going to teach you how to decode the secret language that reveals a watch's true nature without even needing a magnifying glass.
So, how do you unlock all these secrets? It all comes down to one thing: the reference number. Now, this is a code, a string of digits that's stamped on every single Rolex. And to most people, it's just a jumble of numbers. But for an investor who knows what they're looking at, it's basically a cheat sheet. It tells you everything, especially what the watch is made of.
And here's the crazy part. The key is often the very last digit. That one number tells you the material. If it ends in a 0, that's your classic stainless steel. A 5, solid rose gold. A 9, that's solid white gold. Just by knowing this one little trick, you can instantly get a sense of a watch's base value and its rarity. It's an incredibly powerful piece of insider knowledge to have. All right, so you've got the decoder ring. You can now read a Rolex like a pro. But what do you actually do with that knowledge? Let's talk strategy, because in the watch market, there are really two different games being played. And knowing which game you're in, well, that's everything. We're talking about the hype piece versus the rare piece. So hype pieces are all about what's hot right now. Their prices can go to the moon, but they're also super volatile and can crash back down just as fast. Rare pieces, on the other hand, get their value from real, genuine scarcity. They tend to be stable, long-term assets that just steadily appreciate over time. Let's look at the Rolex Submariner. It's a perfect case study of a hype piece. Its retail price is about $8,500, but at the absolute peak of the market frenzy, these things were selling for $18,000. Then, the hype cooled off, the market corrected, and the price came back down to around $11,500. You can imagine, a lot of people who bought at the top learned a very expensive lesson. Now, let's contrast that with a truly rare piece. Decades ago, Rolex managed to acquire a massive chunk of a meteorite. Because of regulations, you literally can't just go out and own space materials like that anymore. So what they have is a finite resource. Every single time they make a watch with one of those incredible meteorite dials, the amount of material they have left gets smaller, which makes what's left even scarcer and even more valuable. See, that's not hype. That's a non-renewable asset, and its value is built on that fundamental scarcity. And this really brings us to a much bigger idea: the mindset behind these kinds of purchases. This isn't just about watches anymore. This is about a fundamental difference in how people approach building wealth. So one path is what you could call the broke mindset. You chase the hype. You see something popular like that Submariner at 18 grand and you use credit to buy it. Then when the market does what markets do and corrects itself, you're left holding an asset that's worth less than you paid and you're paying interest on the debt. Ouch! But then there's the other approach, the wealth mindset. This is where you see currency, cash, not as something to hold on to, because it just loses value to inflation, but as a tool to acquire assets that appreciate, like a truly rare watch.
You then leverage the equity in those assets, which just means you borrow against their value to fund your next investment. It's a cycle of building real wealth, not just spending money.
Okay, so we've talked numbers, we've talked strategy, we've talked assets, but honestly, if you think that's the whole story, you're missing the most important part. The real value of these pieces goes so much deeper than any balance sheet. There's this final layer that's all about what they represent and what they carry forward.
Think about this story, a 1979 solid gold Rolex Datejust. Back then, it cost $1,900 in cash. That was an unbelievable amount of money when a whole house only costs $25,000. Today, that same watch is worth around $30,000. But the real value? It isn't the 15x return. It's the priceless story. It's the connection to the person who worked so hard to buy it and then passed it down.
And that is the ultimate point here. When an asset like this is gifted, maybe to a son or daughter or to a mentee you've guided, it completely transforms. It stops being just an investment and becomes a symbol of a shared journey. It's a physical store of value that carries a priceless, irreplaceable story with it.
So that leaves us with a final question, and it goes way beyond watches. It's not just about what you own, but what you build. What asset are you creating in your life, whether it's knowledge or a business or something you can physically pass down that will grow not just in financial equity, but will build a real legacy of value for the next generation?